It gets worse. Well, this is from the Chancellor's own LinkedIn. They said they would be open and transparent, and it doesn't look like they have been. Have you got some gaps in your CV? Maybe you didn't quite get the promotion you were looking for 3 or 4 years ago, and it's just niggling at you. There it is on your LinkedIn profile saying you were only in the retail banking division. You weren't quite the economist you'd hoped to become. I have some good news for you. Apparently, you can just change it and say whatever the hell you like, if you happen to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. Now, Rachel Reeves is in a bit of a pickle over all this, and to prove that point, I just want to show you something courtesy of the Guido Fawkes news website. Here we have a before and after. What does this show you? Well, this is from the Chancellor's own LinkedIn, who apparently, when she's not going to war with pensioners and farmers who are pensioners, she has some time to adjust her own LinkedIn profile. Maybe she's looking for a new job soon. Here we have at the top, before, economist at the Bank of Scotland, very impressive. And then after, retail banking in Halifax. Well, that's not exactly the same thing, is it? Something has happened here. She's changed this whilst at the Treasury. You might ask, if I did that, if I in my job suddenly admitted that the job I claim to have in order to get the role I'm currently in, if I hadn't done that at all, and I changed it about 3 or 4 years afterwards, would I get in trouble? I think you would. I think I would. Can you imagine if I said I was the economics editor here for 4 or 5 years, when actually I'd been a producer for 6 months? Do you think I'd get in trouble with the CEO? I think I would. But if you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer, good news, it's all hunky-dory, it's all fine. Now, that is not the only problem. It's not just this LinkedIn chicanery which is causing some issues. It also turns out that her tenure at the Bank of England is under scrutiny as well. In 2021, she said she worked at the Bank of England as an economist for 10 years, a full decade. Except now she's saying she's only been there for 6 years. Was it 6 years or was it 10? That's quite a big difference. You'd think she'd know. After all, it's, we're dealing with numbers here. Can she count to 10? Who knows? It gets worse. I was in the Downing Street press briefing today, and the spokesperson was asked, do you have anything to say about this seeming change to the Chancellor's LinkedIn profile? Isn't it a breach of the ministerial code to be lying about your experience? Apparently the spokesman hadn't even seen this, hadn't seen any of these reports, which were all over the newspapers for the last 2 days. No idea about it, hadn't heard a thing. Certainly hadn't spoken to the Prime Minister about it. And you'd think, well, this might be an important thing. My Chancellor is being accused of potentially breaching the ministerial code. Didn't have the chance to do that, didn't have the opportunity, although he is on his 167th flight in the last 30 days. He's over in Brazil, so maybe they just ran out of time. Nonetheless, serious questions to be asked. They did nonetheless stress that we're rebuilding the foundations of the economy. We're very clear on that, very clear on the £22 billion black hole. That's all, we're across all that. But the fact that she might have totally lied about her CV, never heard anything about it. Now, why does this matter? Well, I would argue this was one of the central principles, one of the main reasons you were supposed to vote for Labour in this election. Openness, transparency, honesty, integrity. Already we've had these problems over Lord Ali and the donations and the frocks and the glasses and so on. That's now in the past for now. Now we have a new issue. Does the Chancellor actually tell the truth on her LinkedIn profile? You might say it's not quite the same thing as a CV. You're not allowed to lie on a CV. That would be a breach of the ministerial code. But I would just point this out. How often do you think employers actually print out CVs now versus look at what's online? Often when you apply for a new job, you actually just submit your LinkedIn profile and that is the substitute for your CV. So let's not have any of those arguments that it doesn't really matter, this is fine. I think it does matter because they made this their central plank on the election. They said they would be open and transparent, and it doesn't look like they have been. Now, my colleague, my GBNews colleague, Mark Dolan, also spoke about this, and he spoke about it with his panel. They will explain why they think it's important. I think it's worth taking a listen to that now. So take a look at this.
Oh dear, it's been reported by the excellent Guido Fawkes website that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves lied on her CV, claiming to have been an economist at Halifax Bank, when it turns out she worked in the complaints department. Are you concerned about these revelations of the Chancellor's past? Historian and fellow of the Danube Institute, David Oldroyd-Bolt, editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and former Labour prospective parliamentary candidate Susie Stride. Great to see all three of you.
For me, I was very bought into that goody two-shoes, honest, schoolmistressy Rachel Reeves. And all that negativity, by the way, dealing with complaints, have clearly worn off on her because she was so doom and gloom. But I did buy into it. I thought, this is an honest politician and she's just warning us it's going to be tough.
Grown-ups back in charge?
Yeah, a little bit of that. And then now, of course, we know she's just lying on her CV, just like the rest of us, I suppose. No, far from being Mrs. Schoolmistress Goody Two-Shoes, she fibs on her CV, and of course, everything she promised, it has come to be the opposite. Of course, she's raiding taxes left, right, and centre. Talking
the economy down so that growth goes from 0.5% in July to 0.1% today, that is a problem.
As is inventing a £20 billion black hole, which the OBR has repeatedly said there is no evidence to show has ever existed, whether as a consequence of the last Conservative government or indeed as a consequence of Miss Reeves' rather stupid budget. The problem is that she's not very good at being the Chancellor because, as we now know, she's got about as much economic experience as the table in front of us. And I think this shows a big problem with the Labour Party, as it always seems to happen with Labour governments. They're not very good at telling the truth about themselves and their experience, and they're not very good at government once they get to it. The great exception was Gordon Brown, because he was a trained economist who, malign as I think his influence on the economy was, did actually know what he was doing and how to achieve it. But that's an unusual thing, and I think Ms Reeves is just putting herself in the pantheon of useless Labour chancellors.
Rachel Reeves, Susie, is not going to be part of the furniture for much longer, is she? She's on borrowed time now.
I mean, I just don't agree. I'm sorry, I don't see this as a big deal.
Go. How dare you?
I don't see this as a big deal. And I'm also a little bit like, how are we being lectured? I was just reading Robert Jenrick trying to throw mud at Rachel Reeves. I mean, I'm not going to forget about Robert Jenrick because it was my area where they tried to build a massive development because he did a dodgy deal with Richard Desmond. And then Boris Johnson was like, well, you're too scandalous, I'm kicking you out. So you got him lectured. And then Liz Truss. I mean, even the Times today, a right-wing newspaper, as far as I'm concerned, though I do subscribe to it, they're criticising Liz Truss for what she did on the budget and the fact that she did not take advice on the economic advice that was given to her. And I'm just like, the Tories are trying to lecture us. Now, on the budget, this is what I would say. We are 3 weeks off that budget. 3 weeks off. Let's see what happens over the next couple of years. All I'm saying is this, and I would bet, though I'm not a betting person, but I would happily bet that when Labour, in 5 years' time, when we go to the general election, this country's going to be in a better place. Kids are not going to be in porter cabins, as they were under the Tories. We're not going to have record waiting lists. And this is the thing. People keep saying this and saying that, but we have to raise money from somewhere. Healthy economy, you need healthy schools and a healthy NHS. And the Tories left it in a state.
OK, now, we can't verify those allegations about Robert Jenrick. You're entitled to your view, but he's not here to defend himself.
Dream on.
I'd like you to defend a correction downwards of growth from 0.5% in July to 0.1% today.
I mean,
how is that progress?
Interestingly, the one thing I would agree with you on is this. I mean, I think it is so important to be positive and to not be all, and it's really funny because I think Patrick interviewed me in the summer and I look back on the interview and it makes me laugh so much because I think they were being a bit gloomy.
For political reasons.
Well,
you think they were leveraging the bad news?
There's two things here. Number one, the day after that budget, I listened to that budget, OK, and I literally came up from listening to that budget. I was going on a lovely countryside walk. It was half term. And I was like, I felt so excited. I was like, yes, we're going for investment. And I just saw the papers the next day and it was just negative. And all I can say is, I'm sorry, but the press in this country have got a lot to answer for.
No, what happened was 2 days later, you hear the truth come out because the press have held her to account, drilled down, and like you were saying, it turns out it was all very duplicitous. And, we're now finding out that actually pretty much every farmer is going to have to pay IHT tax, not just a select few wealthy farmers.
Upwards of 60%.
I mean, it's insane. And all this comes out in the fullness of time. So, yeah, of course, I'm sure you skipped out of the budget thinking, what a happy day. But when the actual facts emerge, you think, oh, my God, this is a disaster.
I mean, for me, I think the facts of this budget, I mean, no one can judge. It would be madness to judge a budget 3 weeks, 4 weeks later. This is what I feel excited about. We've got 63 billion
and
investment.
Inflation's going to go up as well.
We've got 63...
You keep talking about investments. Sorry, it's not investments. It's spending taxpayers' money. That's not investment. Investment is when you build a business and you expand your workforce, you make profits, and then you reinvest that profit. What you're talking about is taxing people who are already taxed more than they've ever been taxed in our nation's history, and then spending that money, which doesn't actually exist.
On themselves.
Thereby layering debt. We are already more indebted than we've ever been. At what point does the Labour Party stop believing in this mad, warped form of Keynesianism and realise it doesn't work?
I mean, look, anywhere we are this day and any criticism people want to levy at the economy at the moment, I mean, that is 14 years of the Tories. Sorry, I'm going to say it, because you can't judge. We've been in government for 4 months. I mean,
you can judge the plans you put forward on
to any
harmful
economist.
effects they will have.
Talk to any economist, and they're going to say to you, you cannot judge what's going on in the economy right now on the last 4 months. That's just not the way it works. However, this is what I am going to say. I don't have a problem, and I'm happy to be the unpopular one in the room. I don't have a problem levying taxes against wealthy people. Sorry, I've dedicated 20 years of my life to working with poor kids. I've seen a different side of life. Not me personally, but the kids I've served. And I don't mind, wealthy people in this country paying a little bit more. I do have a concern, 100%, and I've said this on this show a few weeks ago. I do have a concern that if farmers are being hit, but my understanding, I mean, it's very interesting. BBC Radio 4, they were saying only 500 farmers can be affected. Now, look, I am not an expert on this.
NFU disagree with that.
Well, maybe. And for me, the farmers, I mean, I'm not a farmer and I'm not an expert in this area. However, for me, I would be concerned, if it is going to affect small family farms. However, the idea behind this policy was actually, in some ways, and again, you guys are going to probably not like me for saying this, but it was about actually protecting farmers, because it was saying we're going to tax these wealthy people that come in, buy up farming land, and then sell it off.
Charlotte, last word.
Well, the reason why, her intentions have failed is because she's not an economist, and she's certainly not a farmer. I don't think she's ever left London.
Now, finally, the Labour Party were asked about this by Guido Fawkes, by GBNews and several others. This was all over the newspapers over the weekend. Again, very interesting that the Prime Minister didn't know anything about it. But anyway, a Labour source defended Rachel Reeves, saying she worked in retail banking, drawing on her background as an economist, which is not the same thing as being an economist, but there we are. Apparently it's fine when the Chancellor does it.